Dr. William Davis, author of the Wheat Belly and Undoctored books. I wanted to clear up a lot of confusion that seems to surround gallstones. Now, not all the causes for gallstones have been charted. We know that people who are overweight, women tend to have more gallstones. There's probably a lot of other causes, but there's one cause we are confident of, that is certain, and that is weight loss. But weight loss specifically achieved by cutting calories or cutting fat. There have been several studies in which ultrasounds have been performed, serial ultrasounds, at the start of a diet, then week 4, week 8, week 12. And a shocking proportion of people who cut their calories or fat will develop gallstones. Now, it varies depending on what kind of program was followed, age of the participants, sex of the participants, etc. But the incidence of gallstones can be as high as 50 to 60% of people who cut their calories or cut their fat for an extended period. Let me say that again. Up to 50 to 60% of people can develop gallstones when they cut their calories or cut their fat for an extended period of weeks to months. And those gallstones can begin to form as early as 4 weeks. It was traditionally thought that most gallstones develop over years. So this is an exception. Gallstones in the setting of low-calorie diets or cutting fat can develop within weeks. And of course, a substantial proportion of those people develop gallstones will have acute gallbladder problems and have to have their gallbladders removed surgically. Now, why would cutting calories and cutting fat set you up for gallstone formation? Well, you need bile to digest fats. Let's say you've cut your calories and or cut your fats, and there's very little food that requires bile to emulsify. That is, there's very little fat present. Well, your gallbladder, filled with bile, won't squeeze and spit out its bile. It just stays there for extended periods, hours to days. And when that happens, you get something called bile stasis. That is, the bile just stays there, it becomes saturated with various components, and then they start to crystallize. And that's where you get stone formation. And that's why when you cut calories or cut fat, you can develop stones very, very rapidly. So the key here is never cut fat and do not cut calories. That's why in my programs, we eat as much as we want, as often as we like, though your appetite is reduced because of the removal of such things as gliadin-derived opioid peptides. But nonetheless, we never restrict fats, we never restrict calories. So it's when you restrict fat and or calories when you're setting yourself up for gallstones. So all those commercial programs that sell you meal replacement shakes or dinners that are in effect low fat and cutting calories are asking for trouble. I'm surprised there hasn't been a class action lawsuit, to be honest, against those companies for causing so many people to have gallstones. Now it gets worse. If you cut calories and or fat, but your program continues to include grains, wheat and grains, there's something in wheat and related grains called wheat germ agglutinin. And not gluten. It sounds kind of like gluten, but it's wheat germ agglutinin. It's called agglutinin because when it contacts blood, it causes blood clotting or agglutination. Well, wheat germ agglutinin has the curious ability to block the hormone cholecystokinin, or CCK we say. So when you ingest fat, when it goes to the duodenum releases this hormone, CCK, that provokes your gallbladder to squeeze out bile. Well, when wheat germ agglutinin is in the vicinity, let's say you had a sandwich with 2 slices of whole wheat bread, the duodenum is provoked to release CCK, but CCK's action is blocked by wheat germ agglutinin. So once again, the gallbladder is prevented from squeezing out the bile. So you can imagine, if you've cut your calories and or cut your fat, and you continue to include wheat and related grains, you're blocking. You're either not provoking the gallbladder to expel its bile, and or you're blocking the ability of the gallbladder to respond to its CCK. Now it's even worse. A lot of people who have gallstones or follow diets and are overweight also have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO, in which lots of microorganisms populate not just the colon, but have ascended up the ileum, jejunum, duodenum, and stomach. Well, people who develop gallstones, if you take a look at those gallstones, they almost always have the bacteria of SIBO. Isn't that weird? Well, how did they get there? Because the gallbladder attaches to the intestines up in the duodenum. So how would colonic organisms get into the gallbladder and thereby into gallstones? Well, the only way that can happen that I can think of is SIBO. Colonic bacteria like E. coli and Campylobacter and Shigella have ascended all the way up the full length of the intestinal tract and have gained entry into the bile duct and thereby into the gallbladder, and they infect your stones. So those three conditions are a huge setup for gallstones and complicated gallstones, because once those gallstones become infected, they become bigger. Just the fact that your bile is infected means that you're more likely to crystallize. So cutting fat, cutting calories, that leaves your gallbladder unable or not squeezing out its bile, including grains that block CCK, that prevent your gallbladder from squeezing. And then SIBO, that is often present in overweight people and people who have a lot of digestive problems. Those three things combined set you up for not just gallstones, but complicated gallstones. Now, don't confuse this situation with the symptoms that can occur in people who follow high-fat diets, as in my programs, Wheat Belly, Undoctored, also the ketogenic program, Paleo Pro. These are kind of higher fat programs. What happens there is a lot of people go from a low-fat type diet or low-calorie diet. They add a lot of fat, right? They add more butter and olive oil and coconut oil, and they have gallbladder symptoms. That's not because fat causes gallstones. It's because the increased consumption of fat unmasks the presence of pre-existing gallstones. In other words, this person either knew they had gallstones or didn't know it. When you amp up fat intake, now the gallbladder is working hard and squeezing out its bile, and then the stones that were there get stuck in the bile duct and cause abdominal pain. So it's not that the fat, a high-fat program, causes gallstones, but it can unmask their presence. And that's a problem, because it means you have gallstones and you really can't easily follow a high-fat program. And unfortunately, that often means you have to have the gallbladder taken out because you developed gallstones over the preceding years. But know that the causation of gallstones is a very complicated, very high-risk situation when you cut your fat, when you cut your calories. So I would advise you not to do that. So if you follow my programs or similar programs and you don't cut calories, you don't cut fat, you don't include grains that block CCK, and you take efforts to address SIBO on your own, by the way, without the doctor, this is how you not only not have gallstones, but you regain magnificent gastrointestinal health. If you like these sorts of messages I provide, join my conversations in my Wheat Belly blog, Undoctored blog, my Undoctored Inner Circle, where we get very, very serious about these kinds of issues. Of course, subscribe to my YouTube station.